When you're in a stress situation, you don't have a lot of stuff around you that can trigger anything. It's just what your mind and your body does at that point. So those are very nice first aid kit tools that you're supplying us with. Thank you very much for that. Now, you've experienced burnout yourself. What did you hate most of it? Let me invite you to sit back, drop your jaw, tongue, and shoulders, take a deep breath, and if you wish, close your eyes for a moment and feel the beat within. In a few seconds, you just jump from your head to your heart and felt the beat within, opening up to receive even more value and fulfillment out of your business and life. And today's episode. I'm your host, Nico van der Venne, confidant to successful CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs who are striving to achieve everlasting fulfillment. Welcome to the Everlasting Fulfillment Podcast with our next guest, Victoria Mensch, founder of Silicon Valley Executive Academy. Her mission is to inspire high-achieving leaders and teams to prevent burnout and create the life they love. Victoria, all the way from close by Portugal. Welcome to the show. Tell us who you are and what your magic is.
Thank you very much, Nico. I'm very happy to be here. Glad to have this conversation. So as you said, I'm currently in Portugal, but my home base is actually California, Silicon Valley. That's where I'm hailing from, Silicon Valley. And I have a little bit more than 25 years of experience as a high-tech executive. I worked in large global corporations and startups and boutique consulting companies. I founded my own consulting company as well. But originally, I started my career as a psychologist. So I do have a PhD in psychology. And then somewhere very early on, I pivoted into high-tech. So I have this experience from all different sides of life, and I definitely have experience with the burnout on many different levels. So at this point, it's really a passion project of mine to share my experience to prevent burnout with the burnout-proof leadership strategies. That's how we call it, so that we have a happier, more harmonic, more harmony in our lives.
Well, that's very nice, absolutely, and I think targeting on high achievers, you're probably, in the ballpark of a lot of people that end up in burnout, not even knowing, that they're actually running straight into it because of their ambition and things they want to do. What triggered you to, learn psychology? But except for your own burnout, of course, it might be part of it, but what triggered you to go to psychology?
Well, when I was in high school, they told us to look for our passion and follow our passion. So this is what I did. Straight out of high school, I decided that I'm passionate about psychology. So I went and got my bachelor in psychology, my master in psychology, my PhD in psychology. And then I started counseling people, and very quickly figured out that I made a mistake. I cannot take one more day of this. So I followed my passion, and it didn't lead me to the life of fulfillment. So now I know that it was a burnout. But at that time, I thought, well, I made a mistake. I need to switch my career so that I become more productive and more effective and more happy. And I switched to a corporate career in product marketing. So I looked at what it is what are those transferable skills that I have from psychology. I decided that it was marketing, and lo and behold, 4 years later, I'm in the same situation. It's like I made another mistake. I did all this big career switch and, completely 180-degree turnaround, and maybe it's a different industry. So I need to try a different industry. So maybe a little bit more human industry, not semiconductors, but maybe, software. And I'm Silicon Valley, everything is around that, right? And I tried that and then found myself, in a similar situation again. And that actually led me to look at this situation a little bit closer. It's like, what is it that puts me in this position? And now I know through work with my clients and through myself that a lot of it is really not about external circumstances. It's about our mindset, our internal circumstances. And we have much more power and much more control over how we experience this and how we build our careers and how we build our lives and the choices that we make.
Well, it's something that's been coming back on the podcast in several interviews. Indeed, that it's not from the outside that the triggers are actually ending up with the person. It's from within that it actually gets triggered on. So that what I want to ask you, if you look at a high achiever, what's the one thing that they really have that triggers the point where they might head for that burnout or any other form of blockage?
Well, it's interesting because burnout is definitely not limited to high achievers. So
Mhm.
now we know, again, it's so prevalent and there's a lot of awareness about burnout and how we experience it. A lot of experience is really about exhaustion. I feel exhausted. I feel tired, and I cannot get better no matter how much sleep I get, no matter how many vacation days I take, I do not feel better. And it is a chronic stress reaction. People in high achieving roles obviously are subjected to many more stress factors. So that's a big factor. But I want to say that it is very personal. It's very individualized. I remember that's a really nice story that kind of led me to reconsider the whole burnout and stress reaction. So I remember I was juggling family and work, and we were in the middle of a very big launch of a multi-billion-dollar product for the company. The company was really betting its future on that. So it was a lot of stress, a lot of different pressures, and not only at work, but also at home. And I was driving to pick up my son, who was, I don't know, 5 years old, and he was in the carpenting class for a 5-year-old. So I come there and I look at the teacher, the carpenter who's teaching these kids, and I'm thinking, oh, I want life like that. Right. So it's a very like he follows his passion, he's working with kids, he is happy, it's low stress. So maybe I can do that. Maybe I could quit that, a high powered, career and lunch, and I can enjoy, peaceful, serene environment. And I come there and I say hi to this carpenter, a teacher, and just it's a small talk. I'm saying, how are you doing? And he goes, I am so stressed.
Okay.
I am so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed. There's so much pressure at work, at home, and all these kids. And that's when I realized it's really not about where you are in your career. Yes, people in high achieving roles, they have much higher tolerance to stress. So those stress factors from outside are much more obvious, but on each and every level, we can experience that as well. It is a chronic stress reaction. For high achievers, those are bigger stakes, but they also have high tolerance, so they can persevere much longer without getting help or without noticing the symptoms. But it's not really confined just within the high achieving realm.
Yeah, true, absolutely. And one of the things that I've recently was reading about research about how people lived more than 150 years ago, so pre-industrial age, where it came to a point where they were looking at the people's time schedules, and they actually lived with seasons a lot more. So,
Mhm.
when you sow and then you reap, the time between those two seasons, you had to have your corn or whatever grow. And in those times, people didn't actually do a lot. They didn't really work. Where in our time and our Western civilization, or the most people that I talk to, our Western civilization, we work the whole time. Is that something that you also noticed in your practices, that people just, because of their continuous working, it is a repetitive thing?
There is no stop now, right? So, and there are more disruptions for sure. And we know that these disruptions are going to continue to come. So the disruptions come in all different forms. It could be technological disruptions. It could be political disruptions. It could be climate disruptions. It could be anything. It could be relationship, disruptions. Disruptions are everywhere. It's not going to stop. It's not going to end. So it's really up to us to adjust to those. So I mentioned, chronic stress reaction reaction. So whether you're in burnout or you're not in burnout, it doesn't really matter. I think it's important for all of us in the modern day and age to master stress management techniques, some basic tools that each of us would have. And it really comes from managing that stress reaction that we have right now. A lot of it is really unconscious, right? So we just let our survival mechanisms go wild, and we don't really have a language to talk to them. So our fight or flight response, unfortunately, does not understand verbal commands. It's really pre-verbal reaction. So it understands the language of movement. It understands the language of symbols. It understands the language of breath. So those are stress management techniques that we want to master to be able to switch from fight or flight response to rest and digest response. And that's what's going to give you more energy. It's going to give you a clear head. It's going to give you more vitality, more health, and the place from which you can make much better decisions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you're talking about breath. You mentioned breath. Can you give me an example on how somebody, who's listening right now, who knows that they're, at their peak of the stress moment? Because these days, the last quarter of a year, everybody's chasing for New Year's, those final figures ending up, I'm trying to stress out the people on listening to the podcast. So they hype up, and then you can just tell them the solution to their problem. So what would you recommend somebody who's at the point where they're, at the peak and they need help? What would you do?
Yeah, so these are I call them first aid techniques, kind of like a Band-Aid, right? So you cut your finger, you put a Band-Aid on it so you stop the bleeding. So that's how you stop the bleeding. When you feel overwhelmed, you feel anxiety coming up, panic coming up, right? So there are this techniques to calm down, to switch again, as I said, from fight or flight to rest and digest. Breath is one of those. Breath is a bridge between our mind and our body. So that's the language that our basic survival system understands. And there are so many different techniques. The one I really like because it's so simple and so effective is called the box breathing, right? So you inhale on the count of 4, you hold your breath on the count of 4, you exhale on the count of 4, and then you hold your breath again on the count of 4, and you repeat that 4 to 5 times. So what it does, it oxygenates your system and it sends the signal to your survival mechanisms to say the danger has passed. There is no lion in the bushes anymore. You can, you did your job. We survived. Now we can continue with our life. So that's how it works. Again, first aid techniques like that. Action is another one of those because it's a stress reaction that needs to finish with a movement, with actually muscular response. That's how you release that stress that builds up. And so that's why things like you clench and you relax your muscles, that works, that sends that signals like this is it. You made your choice, you decided to act. Now you can relax and you can allow, all other systems come online, your digestive system come online, your endocrine system come online, and everything kind of go into alignment with your normal, less stressful state.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, those are very simple things to do and very handleable, I would say, because it's usually, when you're in a stress situation, you don't have a lot of stuff around you that can, trigger anything. It's just what your mind and your body does at that point. So those are very nice first aid kit tools that you're supplying us with. Thank you very much for that. Now you've experienced burnout yourself. What did you hate most of it?
Well, a lack of motivation was one of those. Lack of motivation, lots of skepticism and negativism, and then actually it comes natural, I say. So you don't even notice this. I think that's the part that is kind of sneaky, right? So you just start complaining. If you go to, any water cooler in any environment in any company, what are you going to hear? You're going to hear complaints, right? So it's nonstop. People start complaining. That creates more negativity, and you're in that state that really kind of does not help you to elevate your energy levels so that you have new ideas, you have a motivation to grow, right? So you have mm, um, joie de vivre, so to
Mhm.
speak, right? So the vitality and vibrancy of life. So that's how you damper it. So that was probably the most sneaky one for me, and I had to have some practices to really change the way I approach everyday activities and like everyday actions to train myself to notice things that I like instead of things that I don't like.
Yeah.
And it is a practice. It can be trained, right? So you actually set your mind to that. Some people call it a gratitude practice. Yes, I think a lot of it is really about the gratitude. And it's as simple as that. It's, not a woo woo. It's really training yourself to notice things that you like instead of things you don't like. And that helps you to be in that state of mind that allows to look at the positive side of things. Yes, it's not like you're going to ignore the negativity or you're going to ignore the complaints, but you choose to approach them, to observe them, and approach them from a different mindset.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful to hear that. It's indeed it's so there's a lot of hype words going on, mindfulness and meditation. Those are not
Mhm.
really hype words. They're very old already, but there are still hype words that used these days. And like you say, it is coming into the moment and being grateful for what you have. And coming from there, have you ever heard of CEO disease or founder syndrome?
I have not heard those terms, but I can guess what it means. If you could tell me a little bit more, then I'm sure I'll recognize the symptoms.
Yeah, most of the people on the podcast already know a couple of the symptoms, but one of them is isolation, is micromanagement, is overrunning yourself, and that's where burnout really comes into play. And it kind of depends as well. You have CEO, you have founders, they're combined as well, CEO founders, but most of the time it is something that is going on with somebody who's in a leadership role at a high level with a lot of responsibility. So high achievers are usually within that in that scope. And when we look at these terminologies, we come to people that have either become stressed because they are not informed of what is going on, or they themselves are causers of the stress. So I don't know if you have any experience with people who actually cause their own stress in their leadership.
It's very interesting because we are talking about leadership, and I talk to corporations a lot as well, and then we start talking about kind of mindfulness and well-being and techniques, all of that. And the reason for this is that I am convinced, and I know from experience, that great leadership really starts with self-leadership. There's so much that leaders do that they serve as role models. You know how they say that it's really from the head. All the changes are kind of trickling down from the head. So a lot of changes that happens within the organization really starts with the leader. So the best thing leaders can do is really become those role models of burnout proof leadership strategies. It does trickle down, like gratitude, for example, that we talked about before. So what it translates into in the corporate environment is the culture of appreciation. And there is a research that shows, that proves without any doubts that the culture of appreciation and people and employees who feel appreciated, they're much more effective. They're much more productive. They actually give more of their talents, of their skills, of their time to the job. But it starts with that practice of gratitude that you do for yourself, and then that trickles down for people around you. So that's what we are talking about. So the people who put them to stress, a lot of that stress reaction, because we were talking about kind of the survival mechanism, it's run by fear. So this micromanagement, the control, the other side of control is really fear. And 99% of those fears that we experience, they never realize. We just live in that state of fear. And that's very contagious. So fear is the most
Yeah.
contagious of emotions, right? So if you as a leader, you reek of fear, then everyone else around you are going to feel that as well. So, and then that translates into behavioral patterns, this micromanagement, for example, right? So like the latest I think greatest discussion that should people work from home or they should work from office, and not call for working from office necessarily, returning to the office and being in the office full time for 5 days a week. A lot of that is really not about productivity. If you look and you honestly to why you're making this decision, you will find that a lot of it is really driven by fear that I cannot control those people. I don't know what they're doing. And that can be rectified with the right practices and the right operational mechanisms where you could allow for a much greater flexibility, which will also translate into more effectiveness and productivity into work environment. So that's where that bridge is between your own self-leadership, your own practices, your own way of preventing that burnout and kind of being in a state of well-being. That will translate into your organization, and that will create a much healthier environment, a much more productive environment, much more harmonic environment, right? So there will be much more harmony within the organization.
Hmm. What are the kind of symptoms that you've noticed in leaders that you get the idea of they're on their way to running against that very big concrete wall? Um, or any symptoms that you've noticed that they might notice themselves, if they reflect on it?
Yeah, so one of the red threads in this burnout, right, is the feeling that I'm out of control. I'm not in control of my schedule. I'm not in control of my life. I'm not in control of my job. So a lot of that is really around like I'm losing control, the overwhelm around this. And for leaders, it's very easy to get in that state because there is a lot of demands from other people. That's demands on their time, demands on their attention, so on and so forth. So that I think is one of those red flags that you want to notice, and you want to step back and you want to see, how do I actually get control over all that? And those are also, very interesting practices that you can do. So what is it that you can control? What is it that you cannot control? So that micromanagement that you were talking about, one of the practices that, should I control this? Is it going to matter? So this thing that I'm trying to control right now, is it going to matter a week from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now? And if it's not, and the answer is not, maybe somebody else can do that. So what's that value that I bring? What's that value that I want to bring? So some of it is really, kind of knowing yourself
Yes.
and crafting that, especially as CEOs, as founders, we are at the steering wheel, right? So we can craft this for ourselves, but what do we want to craft? So that's a job on its own to figure that out. What is it that I want to craft?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of C levels or founders, they've worked on their company for so many years. More CEO work more on cultural wise and strategy, while founders are actually building their little baby from the ground up. Well, what people do is they employ experts, and then at some point they start micromanaging the experts who are actually the people that know what they're doing, while the CEO or the founder is not actually the person that knows how it needs to be done, but they think they
Mm-hmm.
know. And then the ball card starts running in a direction where they're looking at what other people are doing, but actually they're actually messing with their expertise, and then come at the
Mm-hmm.
point where they're run against the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and then end up there. So what would you recommend to other leaders who are striving to achieve their desire, or to make their journey more fulfilling? What would you recommend on that side?
Well, I have lots of recommendations. So one of the we're talking about the practice of gratitude. We're talking about practice of relinquishing unnecessary control. So some of the things like you mentioned, when you try to take over experts, right? So I call this surrogate activities. So again, where is it coming from, right? It's coming from your uncertainty, your fear, your doubt, and controlling that fear, being aware of where it's coming from. That helps a lot. So practices of awareness, of really understanding how your mindset works, and taking responsibility for that. So one of the surprising practices that I keep talking over and over again is what I call self-care. So what is that self-care? It's really a practice of prioritizing of joy, and you have to be intentional in that. So it's not going to come out of nowhere. We forget, right? So behind all these different again, responsibilities and demands, and we want to serve this people and want to answer to those people, everything that we have to do, we actually forget what is it that we want to do. So a practice of self-care is intentionally doing things that bring joy to you, that make you happy. There's no other reason for those activities to exist on your schedule, and you schedule them. So that's a very interesting way to really increase the quality of your life, and also to replenish your energy. And the best thing, going back to the beginning of our conversation, the best thing there is that this entirely in your control. So there's a lot of empowerment there, that it's entirely in your control, and you will see immediately the changes in your own state, in your own energy level, in your own effectiveness, and people around you are going to see that as well, and they'll allow for more room for you to perform those activities. So yes.
That's beautiful, because indeed it comes down again to what comes from within going without. Because the example that you set as being a calm person, a strategist in mind and in communication, is where you simmer down in the activity in the brain as well, because you trust. I found that a lot of issues can be covered by understanding trust, not having trust, but understanding trust, and seeing what happens when you trust somebody to complete a task without you meddling in the soup and turning the spoon around all the time. It's something that I've noticed as well, and it becomes a story of understanding your environment, yourself, and yourself in that environment, and then applying certain things so that you are the example to other people around you.
Mhm.
So, Victoria, I think, from my point of view, you're very knowledgeable about this subject, and I think people might be triggered by a couple of things that you just said. Where can people, contact you, find you? What are your triggers, and what's the project that you're working on right now?
Well, the best way to get in contact with me is on LinkedIn. You can look up Victoria Mensch. So I put a lot of my content there. There's a way to connect with me there and learn more about what we do and how we do it. One of the projects that really interests me right now is how leadership is going to be impacted by artificial intelligence. So, and the base premise that I have, and I absolutely convinced in that artificial intelligence fundamentally is going to transform how we lead people within the organization, and it's going to actually demand from us to be more human. So employees are, becoming more independent, more entrepreneurial. You can't just command them anymore. They'll have many more options to do it. So you have to develop this new leadership styles, right, that are much more human, that, the emotionally intelligent and empathic, and really are built on the foundation of maximizing the well-being of everyone around from a human perspective. So it really requires a new model of leadership and really prioritization of that. So all those things that we were talking about, again, goes back to that great leadership really starts with self-leadership. You start with yourself, you develop those skills, and people around you are going to change. And lo and behold, we are in a much more balanced and harmonized environment.
That's beautiful. That's really, it kind of hits really at the spot where I'm thinking as well. Yoram Solomon, who joined the podcast in a previous episode, also indicated that leadership is a job in itself. It's not something that you get upgraded towards. It's something that you have to see as something that you educate yourself into and understand what's going on. And like you said, it starts from the person themselves, because in a lot of leadership trainings and whatever coaching that you do, it is about you first and then about the company or the people that you work with. So that's beautiful that you're going in that direction. And AI, absolutely, I agree. It's a turning point. Not everybody's using it yet. I even tried my kids to let them use it, but they don't see the added value yet. They're 40 and 12, so I don't understand that they're not preoccupied with that.
They
But
will.
I do. I
Faster
use it
than
a
you
lot.
think.
So, yeah. It's one of my team members. So AI is Luna. Luna is one of my team
Right.
members, and I use her. I ask her a lot. I don't use her. It sounds very strange when you're saying that about a computer, but anyway.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Victoria, and people who are listening. Really take on the advice that Victoria gave us. A couple of great tips, just really simple stuff that can help you, simmer down a little bit and get down into the regions that I always talk about, jumping from head to heart and feeling that beat within, because your heart, synchronizes with that breathing as well. So that kind of triggers a lot of stuff in your body that can calm you down and, be chill in your job. So I would say, Victoria, enjoy your time in Portugal. Enjoy your trip back to the States, to California. It's a different country, apparently. That's what I've heard from a couple of people I talked to. But in the essence, the people, day by day, people just do the same thing that they used to do. And something's changed at some levels, but who cares? In any case, thank you so much for taking your time. And, to the listeners, have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you for listening to the Everlasting Podcast. Let me leave you with a few questions to answer in the comments. How do you see the different topics we discussed during this interview? What are your thoughts? What stood out for you? Let us know in the comments or just send us your feedback. We launch new episodes weekly. Don't miss any by ensuring you are subscribed to the show. Click the follow button now. We depend on the organic growth of the podcast to inspire more and more people. So by giving us a 5-star review and sharing this episode with at least one of your friends who might be interested in the subject, you will significantly help more people become inspired. But more than anything, I am grateful to you for taking the time to listen to the show. If you are also a successful CEO, founder, or entrepreneur who has inspiring words to say, feel free to contact us for an interview at contact@nicovandevenne.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you again soon with more inspirational conversations on achieving everlasting fulfillment.